Ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha, and my apologies for being away for so very long. I've just finished up a hell week at the day job, as does tend to happen within the IT industry, and as a result, I very greatly lament the fact that I have left you all without any videos, without discussing any topics, or even being able to finish the video game review that I'd been working on, which will be coming soon, I promise you. But today I wanted to discuss Henry Cavill's statements during a recent video that really resonated with me and made me think back through a great deal of scenarios within numerous fandoms that include gaming, although my discussions on this won't be completely focused on video games alone. You have to remember that while I am a gamer, I'm also a geek and a nerd and a lover of all things sci-fi, which includes Star Trek, Star Wars, Farscape, Stargates, SG-1, Atlantis, and yes, even Universe. You get the idea though. While I'm pretty heavily opposed to the tribalism that fandoms tend to engage in, I do know what it is like to be a fan of something, especially in recent years. Something that has also become prevalent in recent years is an extreme push from games developers, from Hollywood, and from traditional media to paint disgruntled or disenfranchised fans within each of these separate realms as quote-unquote toxic. The idea that fans that are upset over a decision, a design choice, or the alterations of a character or element are merely acting in a capacity of entitlement and are poisoning the creative work they're railing against. And we've seen it with EA's DICE in response to Battlefield fans and the backlash over Battlefield V or 5 or whatever, in which they denigrate and mocked their so-called toxic fans. We've seen it with the Ooblets developer who accused gamers of being toxic after his exceptionally condescending announcement that the game would be going Epic Game Store exclusive. We've seen it with Rian Johnson and the now well-known controversy surrounding Star Wars, and we saw it with some people irate over the backlash that the Sonic the Hedgehog movie character design received. Henry Cavill, however, is of an opinion that very much mirrors my own thoughts on these matters. In a recent interview conducted by Jake Hamilton, Hamilton and Cavill were discussing Superman up to this point, then quickly moved on to Geralt of Rivia, in which Hamilton referred to the typical line of small but vocal minority of people that are toxic in nature. And here is the question and Cavill's answer.
There's something really interesting with this character that I find fascinating, which is that he genuinely really does just want to do the right thing. But everywhere he goes, whether it's a new town or a new bar, people just kind of give him a hard time and they rag on him despite the fact that he has great intentions. I'm curious if that's comparable to this sort of world, this culture of toxic fandom, where like if you make a movie, especially if you make a superhero movie, like you have great intentions, but there are always going to be a small yet vocal group of people there can kind of just be toxic.
I understand what you're saying, but when it comes to fans, it is a fan's right to have whatever opinion they want to have. And people are going to be upset because, especially when you're talking about books or games, because you're never going to be the exact person who they had in their head or who they played on Witcher 3, for example. I don't necessarily consider that toxic. I just consider that passionate.
I saw this the other night, and as I said, it really resonated with me. Hell, I've even had people come to me and ask me how I cope with the more toxic elements within my own fandom and all of the negativity and even the hate that I receive, whether it be a result of my opinions or getting a bit of information wrong or not entirely accurate. So I wanted to take a look at this response from Henry Cavill and also the response of the director for the Sonic the Hedgehog movie and use those as an example of how to handle such criticisms in a mature and respectful manner, which I think Henry Cavill very much did in this interview. Because he is 100% correct. If a fandom is upset or disgruntled with a choice of casting, with a design choice, with the direction of a project, with a lack of content or a lack of meaningful content or any of those things, plus I'm sure there are more that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head, the fans are approaching these issues from a place of fandom. They already enjoy the characters and the world or the franchise, and if they are irate, perhaps it is because the choices made don't fit their vision of their previous experience. But that doesn't mean that they're coming to dump on things just to spread hate, just to engage in some form of rabies-induced frothing at the mouth. No, the vast majority of them are expressing their feelings and their opinions out of a desire to not necessarily get their own way, but in the hopes to, at the very least, see the creation be made better. To see the movie franchise or the video game series do better because they are fans and they've enjoyed these things immensely up until this point and they wish to continue enjoying them, not be driven off and looked down upon as we have seen from the likes of legacy media or Rian Johnson and Kathleen Kennedy, or of an arrogant and pompous games developer who had seemingly forgotten what it was that drew people to their games in the first place. We see a very clear dichotomy between these two camps. The ones that, while they may not entirely understand the fandoms, they at the very least still respect them, such as Henry Cavill. And the ones such as Rian Johnson, or the Ooblets developer, or EA's DICE, people who are so arrogant and condescending that they completely ignore the fans and by extension also rail against anything that even made these people fans to begin with. And that is why I so fervently agree with what Cavill was saying here. Because for a lot of the outrage, a lot of the unrest and the discontent, it's important to understand the reasons why the fans are disgruntled or outraged over certain decisions. Because the vast majority of the time, that is all that is needed. That understanding that can lead to a reasoned response. It can lead to a response that isn't filled with arrogance or vitriol or spite. It can lead to the fans knowing that at the end of the day, their voices, whether they end up leading to some form of change or no, are at the very least not being dismissed out of hand. And that can be a very powerful motivator in its own right. Responses like Cavill's here can embolden and even encourage fans of the Witcher games to give the Netflix series a legitimate go of things where they might not necessarily have been willing to before. I know that I had little to no interest in the Witcher series on Netflix, but after seeing this, yeah, I'll give it a watch and let it stand on its own merits. I'll at least be willing to give it the opportunity that it wouldn't have otherwise had. Now let's take a look at what the director for the Sonic the Hedgehog movie did in response to fan backlash over the nightmare fuel that was the original design for the character. They went back to the drawing board and committed to a complete redo of the character because, you have to admit, it was pretty bad. And people met this understanding with high praise, and the redesign is far better and will result in a better and more well-received movie. And I'm certain that there will be numerous people that will go and watch the movie by simple virtue that the director cared enough to respond with fairness and honesty and with a passion to see the movie do well. He didn't dismiss the fans. He didn't accuse them of being toxic. He didn't call them man babies. No, he listened. And who would have thought people will respect you far more in the long run when you comport yourself as a decent human being? Do you think many people would be encouraged to return to Battlefield V or 5 or whatever based upon DICE's arrogant response to criticism? Do you think Star Wars fans will be emboldened to give the next movie a go after Rian Johnson's exceptional condescension and spite? No, that sort of attitude, that mentality, will only serve to breed hostility. And it still amazes me how legacy media, how Hollywood, and also how many games developers completely and with totality lack the comprehension that a touch of understanding, a bit of respect, however small, can go such a very, very long way with the fans. But once again, ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha, and I'll see you next time.